Welcome, gentlemen of the league, to another edition of the League Power Rankings. It's great to be coming at you once again on a victorious Tuesday morning. We're going to start off a little bit differently. I'm going to pour one out for all the victors out there. Here at 12:30 in the afternoon, we're pouring one out for all you victors. Here's to you. Now, with that being said, we have a lot of great storylines this week. And one of the more fun weeks of fantasy I think we've had. We had some very intriguing matchups. We had the toilet bowl between Ajit and Pablo, the battle to see who would truly be the dumpster team of the week. We had, of course, Nibs and I's Monday Night Thriller, which turned out to be a Monday Night Killer since most of our players were absolute dog shit. And we had some other great matchups that we're going to get to in this edition of the Power Rankings. It's the Week 6 Power Rankings, and it's going to be starting out where it always does. We've got the Dumpster Team of the Week coming at you right now. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for the Dumpster Team of the Week, and it gives me great pleasure to bring you this excellent content because we have, at number 14, a new Dumpster Team of the Week, Character Concerns FC, baby. This is it. The toilet bowl occurred this weekend between the 0-5 Pablo and the 1-4 Ajit, and it couldn't have gone worse for AJ as he watched Pablo's team come back. An unprecedented performance by Ezekiel Elliott, who has done nothing all year. He gets it done. Then Judy follows it up with a pretty solid game, and then Broncos D brings it home, baby, with a solid game. Now, some of you may be thinking, Ajit's demise, of course, it started on Sunday, right, with the games. That's where you'd be wrong, baby. Ajit's demise started on a Friday night out in the city, baby, driving his pimpin'-ass new Mustang around the city. He got the sweet car. You think, what could go wrong? Well, the problem is you don't know where you're going, kid. You navigated the streets of Seattle worse than you navigated the draft this year, and that's why your team is so bad. Now, when you look at this, okay, you've got this sweet car, you've got that big screen, but you don't know how to use the big screen. So why don't you use the big screen next year instead of using it for your navigation? Use it to watch some film of NFL players so you know how to draft guys that are going to score this year. Ajit, you didn't score this week. You didn't score at Ryan House. You're not scoring anywhere. Get it together. You got the car. No excuse. The pilot is the problem. Here we go, folks. That's going to do it for the Dumpster Team of the Week. Ajit, I'm sorry, I got to put you in here, ceremonial purposes. You knew the stakes. You knew that you were in the toilet bowl with Pablo, and you didn't come prepared, and you didn't get the victory. With that being said, we're moving on. Number 13 is coming at you right now. Gentlemen of the league, it is time for the number 13 team in our power rankings. And we have another surprise here, my friends. It is not Pablo that is the number 13 team. We have at number 13, Jacoby Beef. Cam Lautenschlager. Cam, the beginning of the year, I think I ranked you in the top 5, kind of out of respect for your history in this league. You're a storied owner that has led your team on many a playoff run in the past. Well, unfortunately, the well has now completely dried up for you. The good fortune and mysticism that was carrying you through previous seasons has instantly dried up like an aquifer that has been drained one too many times. When you look at your roster, it's pretty clear that you have very little talent at receiver. Mike Williams is either Mauna Loa or Mount Si. I mean, he is the ultimate boomer bust receiver in fantasy football. Your flex position has been sort of You've had to bench Deontay Johnson, one of your top picks. Nothing has really gone well for you, and you have a revolving door at quarterback. Geno Smith didn't get much done. Overall, 63.2 points. And the craziest stat of all is, as bad as Pablo's team has been this year, you have scored a grand total of 8 points more than him over the course of the season. You are right down there at the bottom. And Pablo, unlike you, has actually been trending up the last couple of weeks. Your team is falling to pieces. And it's not working, Cam. So I had to put you down here, number 13. Hey, no hard feelings, man, but you're basically, unless something massive changes, you're basically in better luck next year territory. All right, moving on. It's going to be the number 12 team coming at you right now. Gentlemen, we're moving on. It's number 12 time, and we have the Path of the Righteous Man coming all the way up to number 12 after 2 straight very solid weeks. He broke 100 for the first time last week. Then he followed up with a 99, which was good enough for you to be in the top half of the league in scoring this week. You actually did very well. And it wasn't because anybody went off, really. You had nobody over 15 points, but you just had consistency throughout your lineup this week. First time that's happened this season. Alvin Kamara is beginning to start getting going after he's had some injury issues. But watch his legal situation. Zeke was the big surprise. Ajit was probably feeling pretty good knowing that you were relying heavily on Zeke to get a decent game. And lo and behold, in the second half, after he did nothing in the first half, he just starts breaking big ones, including a touchdown that was really a throwback to his former self. Very surprising development. I don't know if this success is really sustainable for you, but your team has come back and done really well the last couple of weeks. You gave me a scare for sure a couple weeks ago, and you come back here and you beat Ajit. Hey, I was talking in my recap video about how you might be the worst team ever. Well, you're pretty much not the worst team ever now. I don't think Ajit ever strung 2 good weeks together that season he had a couple years ago where he was just completely awful. So with your team, hey, it's going in the right direction. Not sure if it's really sustainable, but you got your first win out of the way, and so at least you know you won't be remembered as the guy who couldn't win any games. All right, with that being said, we have to move on to number 11 here, coming at you right now. All right, gentlemen, coming in at number 11, we have another surprise. Gabo McGregor, I need a win. Now, I ranked Gabo's team low in the initial power rankings the first week because of his receiver group, and now you're starting to see what I was talking about with that, because his receiver group wasn't deep to start the season, and it's been getting worse every single week. And now you've had to trade for Keenan Allen, who's injured. You've had multiple injuries. Javonte Williams out for the season. You've had to ditch Russell Wilson, and then you went for the only guy worse than that, which is Zach Wilson, in terms of fantasy production. And you look at this team, and there's no real direction that I feel like you can use to get out of it. I mean, last week, you scored 63 points, and we're all thinking, Gabo's bottomed out, okay? He's reached the floor of what his team is capable of. But then, like so many of your countrymen at the border of this fine country, you find a way to tunnel underneath the floor and go under to even go below what we thought your floor was. And so that has been a real issue. And then you do these team names calling people out, and you're just not winning. You're not winning when you do that now. It's been 2 straight weeks. I don't think there's any way back for this team. You got the injury bug this year. It happens to everybody. I didn't think there was enough depth on this team to begin with. Darren Waller has been disappointing. You almost didn't miss him at all on his bye week. He actually ended up having a better performance than Dawson Knox and anything that Waller's really been able to come up with recently. St. Brown on a bye, but you were never beating Jake, even if all your guys were healthy. Jake's team is clearly way better than you in another class entirely. Gabo, stop tunneling like your countrymen underneath our walls and start going in the upward direction, getting some more points going. With that being said, we are going to move on. It's number 10, and it's coming at you right now. All right, gentlemen of the league, moving on. It is number 10, and we have here Super 8 at number 10. It was a battle of the 8s this week between 8 Ball and Super 8. And as most of us probably would have predicted, Brennan and 8 Ball coming out on top. It's another week where a respectable point total is gathered in by JoJo. Unfortunately, he picked the wrong team to play, as he's done every single week basically this year, except for that last week where he got his first W. It was more of the same from Super 8. And what you look at with this team, really, first of all, you have the Najee Harris issue, which you're trying to solve by trading him away. Harris has been a major disappointment. Even with a touchdown, he didn't even break 12 points. Even a lackluster Darrell Henderson was able to fart out more points than he got from Najee this week. And there's just a lot of guys that are inconsistent on your team. Tony Pollard, good player, not a consistent fantasy scorer at all. He's way up and down. Garrett Wilson is very boomer bust as well. And George Pickens. You just have such a wide range of outcomes on your team that for every guy that goes off on your team, you have another guy that takes a shit. The only constant production that you get from your fantasy roster is from Mahomes and Kelsey. That's just not good enough. You have to have more than just those two guys producing on a consistent basis. It's not happening, and that's why you're having these good weeks, but you're never having any of these great weeks that you need to get these victories. You are currently, I believe, 9th in the scoring standings, so not really terrible. But again, you have the most points against. That's going to cost you. Your team is not as bad as what your record looks like, but it's still not good enough to be any higher in these power rankings. So sorry about that, JoJo. With that being said, we are moving on. It is going to be the number 9 team in the rankings, and it's going to be coming at you right now. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have at the number 9 spot, Jungle Fever with Chris Has. Chris, I told you when we last spoke that if you did lose this week, you were going to take a significant drop. Well, you lost this week. You were pretty handily beaten by Leicester's team, even though you basically had Leicester right where you wanted him. Leicester, a Raiders heavy team, had 3 of his key starters on bye, including, and this is not an exaggeration, one of his most important players, his kicker, Daniel Carlson, who has been excellent all year. Not trying to take anything away from you. That was smart by picking him. I think that was one of the more underrated picks of this draft because he's just giving you lots of field goals every single week. But moving on back to Chris here, your team is now not only being hampered by the fact that you are now losing Marquise Hollywood-Brown without any clear replacements for him. Hunter Renfrow is now in the equation for you. If you look at your team, Isaiah McKenzie, Curtis Samuel, Tyler Lockett, these are not guys you want to be relying on. None of these guys are really going to produce Marquise Hollywood-Brown's production. So when you're talking about that, you're adding it to the fact that your running back situation is not good either. You have Chase Edmonds, who is completely useless at this point. He is lost out to Raheem Must-Start Mostert, who is now on Jake's team. He got the better end of that deal, and there's not a lot there. And one last point I want to make. I know that we were trying to talk trade last night, and I don't know how drunk you think I was on Friday night when we were at Rhinehouse, but I'm not drunk enough to trade you T. Higgins for Isaiah McKenzie, bro. I don't know why you offered me that, but just so you know, the amount of alcohol that it would take for me to do that trade would also probably be fatal. So just don't offer me that bullshit anymore. If you're going to try and get T. Higgins, make me a real offer. Although when I look at your team, other than Mark Andrews, none of your pieces look that good to me. So this team could easily fade out and kind of fall apart. You're already 10th in the league in scoring, and you just lost probably your biggest piece other than Mark Andrews. So, yeah, projection down for you, Chris, I'm sorry to say. With that being said, we're moving on to the number 8 team in our power rankings. It's coming at you right now. All right, gentlemen, it is time for the number 8 team in the league. Just missing out on the upper half was bad luck. Bait strikes again. But here's the thing, folks. Now, I liked Sean's team in the initial rankings, and you're starting to see why. He makes a good trade. He gets Jamar Chase on his team, and all of a sudden his team blows up. I mean, he just took Cam out back and gave him the old Yeller treatment this week. Shotgun blast to the back of the head, and just killed his ass out there with an incredible performance. Number 1 scorer in the league this week. Let's take a further look at why I'm bullish on this team. First of all, technically he is 4th in the league in scoring. Now, the reason I didn't rank him higher is because there's such a big cluster of teams in the top 6. All the point totals are really similar. It's pretty negligible. So I'm going mostly off roster. But if there's a riser at this bottom part of the league, it's Sean Bates. And let me tell you why. Marquise Hollywood-Brown, out of commission potentially for the entire season now. DeAndre Hopkins coming back. I wasn't super optimistic about Hopkins being an elite weapon before, but who are they going to throw to? Okay, it's not going to be Robbie Anderson. By the way, Ajit, if you want to continue to be Character Concerns FC, I highly suggest you pick up Robbie Anderson so that you can put on your Mike Singletary pants and kick his ass out of the game, Steve Wilkes style, okay? But getting back to Sean's team, what you're looking at is a potential situation where you have Michael Pittman Jr., Jamar Chase, and DeAndre Hopkins. No longer will you have to start Romeo Dubes, who is basically needing to change his name to Dubious because he was way overhyped coming into the season with this Packer offense struggling. Eckler is running on all cylinders. Eno Benjamin, you don't have to play him anymore because ETN, that might be a big-time steal. He has really emerged with double-digit points the last couple of weeks, looking like a very, very solid RB2 spot, especially when your wide receivers are so good. This team has a chance to rise and make a run. My prediction about this team, there's only one team, by the way, that I was really, really wrong about from the looks of things, and that was Brennan. I had Brennan kind of low. He's obviously way better than I thought. Everyone else has kind of fallen in where I thought they would. So I'm going to give myself a little pat on the back for that one. And Boston. I was also wrong about Boston's team. So, yeah, I was wrong about two, but everyone else I pretty much got right. Sean, I believed in you. You made this trade. I think it's making your team a lot better. You got rid of Gabe Davis, who's a good player, but Jamar Chase is next level. There's no comparison to me between Davis and Jamar. So with that being said, we're going to move on to the top half of the league. We're coming at you with number 7 right now. All right, gentlemen, moving into the top half of the league where shit is getting real. We have Boston Monroe and Gimme Moore. It's funny because the two most disappointing players on your roster are both named Moore. Elijah Moore, who you drafted, has been completely absent, and DJ Moore, even more so, just absolutely doing nothing. Of course, he had no chance with PJ Walker. I don't know how many of you guys watched that game between the Panthers and the Rams, but they only let PJ Walker throw bubble screens and passes to McCaffrey. That was it. It was one of the most embarrassing offensive game plans and performances I have ever seen in my life. And although McCaffrey was a big recipient of that because he got the ball force-fed to him on every single play, it seemed, DJ Moore, once again suffering. He is as bad as I ranked him in my rankings. I might have ranked him too low. Kyle Pitts got a touchdown last week. DJ Moore has done nothing, and it's not his fault. They just have a terrible offense. Boston, your team is technically second in points, but 2 weeks ago you were number 1 by a pretty decent margin, and the last couple of weeks you have failed to break 100. This week you're all the way down at 82, and you're starting to see the cracks in the foundation, okay? James Robinson, he was a huge component to your success earlier on. He has now been outscored I think 3 weeks in a row by ETN. He is starting to fade. ETN's talent is starting to bubble up. He's not making the type of rookie mistakes he was making earlier. James Robinson, a faller. Christian Kirk, same deal. The Jags offense that was rolling through teams early in the year has really stalled out. Even last week when they had a lot of points, none of them were going to Christian Kirk. He only had 8.8. That's not going to get done. Clyde Edwards-Helaire. The guy is a touchdown-dependent player. He was getting all kinds of touchdown luck earlier in the year, artificially inflating his value. He has only gotten double-digit rush attempts in one game. He had a game where he had 12 fantasy points with 0 rushing yards. How sustainable is that? Okay, that's not going to happen very often. Your team could be in very serious trouble of a fall apart if you don't get it together. And when you look at your bench, there's nobody on that bench that is going to save you right now. So unless the guys in your lineup now get it together, you could be one of those teams that falls down in the rankings and ends up kind of closer to where I thought you would be all along. Is the algorithm failing? Who knows? We will see. But that is kind of the summary of what's going on with this team and why I have it ranked the way it is. With that being said, we're moving on, folks. Number 6, the playoff tier teams coming at you right now. Gentlemen, coming in at number 6, the first of our playoff tier teams, we have Car Maintenance. Car Maintenance, Luster. Obviously, we've been at odds at times during these rankings. I had you down to the dumpster, not for your team reason, but for personal reasons, of course. But while I had your team somewhat in the middle of my preseason rankings, you have slightly outperformed my expectations. And I think the big reason why is you had faith in guys that a lot of us didn't have faith in, and it's working out. Number 1 guy that I would classify on that list is Miles Sanders. You drafted him. A lot of people, including myself, were pretty low on Sanders. He's never really done anything in his career that's that good or exciting. And all of a sudden, he's playing like the player we thought he was going to be 2 years ago when he was getting drafted in the first and second round of a lot of drafts. When you add that to the fact that Devontae Adams and Jalen Waddle have been an outstanding duo in the wide receiver space, and you have the number one kicker, your team's floor is very high. You've been consistent throughout the season. When I did the alternate standings, I want to make sure I get this right. I did the alternate standings. You would be 7-5 in the standings where we add in weeks that you play against the league, that alternate sort of game format that we had. Your team was performing well, not just against your opponent, but also against the rest of the league as well, keeping it within the average. I really like this team. You want me to talk about Carr? Well, I'm just going to talk about how you don't really need Carr because you went out and got Daniel Jones. He gave you just enough, and you got a victory because you have a lot of surrounding talent there. I like this team's depth. I really do. You showed it this year, and the best part is all these Raiders you're going to have them for the rest of the year unless they get hurt. Adams has never really been hurt, so I'm not concerned about that. So I think that this is a really good team, and I think that you're going to be one of those teams that's right there at the end competing for a playoff spot. With that being said, we're moving on to the top 5. It's number 5, and it's coming at you right now. Gentlemen, we are moving on to the number 5 team in our rankings, and at number 5, we have Bean Cup with Jake Smith. Now, a lot of you are thinking, well, he's had one good week, but overall, he's not super high in the scoring rankings. Currently 8th in the standings. Here's the reason why I have Jake this high. It's just one simple reason. Kenneth Walker III. I was, the guy I was nervous about the Seahawks drafting on draft day above all the other guys was Kenneth Walker. This guy, I saw him play a couple times at Michigan State on television, and he is awesome. He is really good. Other than Breece Hall, I would have him ahead of every other rookie by a mile. They're really in a tier completely above every other rookie running back in the league. Excellent player, and now he's getting his chance, and he took full advantage of it last week. You didn't play him. I'm not sure why you didn't. Maybe you were just nervous that he wasn't going to perform. I think you're going to put him in your lineup. When you have Saquon and Kenneth Walker at running back, yeah, that's a team that can go on a big-time run. Burrow got it together this week on the road. That was nice to see. Kupp is still doing Kupp things. Even though he didn't have a great week, he still managed to have 13 points. The guy is just a target monster. The Rams offense is completely useless. They can only do a couple of different things, and Kupp is one of those things, so he's going to continue to score for you. And then when you look at it, Godwin coming back is the guy that makes a difference on your team. Now, the reason your team is low in the scoring rankings isn't because of any of the guys I just talked about. As I mentioned in the recap video, maybe you guys remember this, maybe you guys don't, but Jake was last in kicker, defense, and flex points this season. So the fact that he's been terrible at 3 positions and is still winning games, it shows you the quality and depth of his team, which is why I had him ranked super high early on in the season. He's back in the top 5. And looking forward to see what this team can do. Hopefully, he doesn't just start going crazy, but I can see it happening very easily. With that being said, we're going to move on into the top 4 of teams this week, and it's coming at you right now. Gentlemen, we are moving on to the number 4 spot in our rankings. And at number 4, we have White Picket Fence with Brandon Niblock. Nibs, it was a classic battle of the Titans. Our matchups are always crazy. They're always insane. They always usually come down to overtime or some wacky bullshit, just like last year with CeeDee Lamb fucking me over at the very end of the game with a walk-off touchdown. This week, it was a muffed punt that did in your chances. We were both sitting there wondering why the hell our guys weren't doing anything. Cortland Sutton, you might as well have started Chris Sutton, the former Blackburn Rovers striker, instead, because he would have gotten you almost as many points as Cortland did. And meanwhile, Justin Herbert was barely any better. But overall, you took an L this week. And what I found out, which is very interesting about your team, is when I did the alternate standings, as far as how teams are doing against the league, what I realized is that in the last 4 weeks, you are 0-4 against the league. You have not been above average in any game. The loss of DeAndre Swift has basically capped your team's ceiling at a very specific spot. Hurts hasn't been lighting up the points quite like he has. The Eagles' second half struggles, where they can't seem to get anything going on offense in the second half, has affected you. The one bright spot that I can see, obviously, is Breece Hall. Breece is looking like the guy in New York right now. He was struggling early on this year, but you were patient with him, and now he is getting going in a big way. Drake London's a guy I'm concerned about on your team as well. The Falcons just do not pass the ball if the game is even remotely close. The targets he was getting early in the year have dried up. You have some things to work out. Hopefully Freiermuth will be back for you next week. Swift, hopefully he doesn't go down again, because your running back position is very precarious. You've got a lot of frickin' basically driftwood on your bench at the running back spot that's not really going to save you in the event of an actual emergency. So with that being said, you're still at number 4. I'm high on your team, but there is a little bit of this lingering theme here that you haven't been able to score above average in the last 4 weeks. With that being said, we are going to be moving on to the top 3 of the rankings here. Number 3 coming at you right now. All right, gentlemen, coming in at number 3, we have Best Team Revenge Tour. The Revenge Tour got a much-needed win, albeit an extremely stressful one. I can't tell you how frustrated I was with Justin Herbert last night, who looked like a guy who was naked in the sack with his girl, frantically slapping his dick trying to get something going, but it wasn't working. He needs to get the Viagra out next week against the Seahawks and light them up. I got Jefferson on bye. I cannot afford another shit pile of performance by Herbert. Now, with that being said, when you look at my week this week, okay, if you would have told me that between Niners D, Jeff Wilson, and Justin Herbert, I would have gotten 13 points from those 3 positions that have been so key for me all year, I would have thought there was no way that I would have won this week. But I got a couple of clutch performances from unexpected sources. Darrell Henderson Jr. falls into the end zone late in the game, gets me over that hump. He ended up with 12 points. Juju Smith-Schuster, I've been waiting for signs of life from Juju for this entire fucking year. And what you saw against the Bills is what I think I imagined when I drafted him, was that this guy is the most dynamic wide-out weapon that you guys have, breaking tackles, getting into the end zone on a long touchdown, then getting another long catch later. The guy's extremely talented. They just don't really use him very much, unfortunately, but he definitely has upside. And then the last guy, Ryan Suckup, 14 points from the kicker spot. I couldn't have come at a better time for the Buccaneers offense to just completely stall in the red zone time and time again. So thank you for those guys. The fact that I overcame this week with 2 major bye weeks and an injury and still be one of the best teams in the league, I'm really happy about that. I think T. Higgins is going to continue to get better. Now his ankle is starting to heal. I think he's going to be back in the upper tier of the scoring limits. And hopefully Kyle Pitts can get a couple of more touchdowns. Though unfortunately for me, he won't be getting covered by Samuel Womack III in the red zone like he was against the Niners after all of our corners got injured. So maybe not super bullish on Pitt's sustainability, but I basically don't have any other choice but to play him. That being said, I'm happy about the win this week. I'm still going to put my team pretty high because I'm 3rd in the scoring standings and I'm on a 4-game win streak. So it's pretty tough to argue with me being at number 3. With that being said, we are going to move on to the number 2 team in the rankings. It's coming at you right now. All right, gentlemen, moving on to the number 2 team in our fantasy league power rankings. We have the married man, Nate Solly. I'm sorry, Mrs. Jackson. When it comes to Nate, he's been up here at the top of the standings for pretty much the entire season. And why? Because his team, while it is rarely spectacular, it is always solid. One of the reasons why is that Lamar Jackson, even on his off weeks when he's not playing super well, he's always going to give you something. He gives you another, not great, but solid performance in a low-scoring week for everybody, basically. And the key storyline with this team was pulling Deion Jackson out of your ass and getting a huge performance. It saved you from an embarrassing loss to Boston. 23.1 points. He basically mimicked Derrick Henry's typical performance by doing that. Really, really sharp pickup by you. Mike Evans had an off week, but Devontae Smith was able to make up for it. You scrambled to get 90 points this week. You scratched and clawed for those 90 points, but you got there and it was enough to win. Just doing enough to win. Honestly, Nate, you're 5-1. You've been a little bit lucky this year. The scoring ranks haven't been as kind to you. You're, I think, 6th in the league in scoring points. So still in the top half, but not elite by any stretch. But you're finding ways to win consistently. Your team has a very high floor. Other than week 1, you haven't had any really bad weeks at all. So with that being said, we are now moving on to the moment you've all been waiting for. The number 1 team in the league. It's not going to be a surprise coming at you right now. All right, folks, it is now time for the number 1 team in the Fantasy Football League. And no surprise, retaining his spot from last week, it is 8-Ball, Brennan Costello. Brennan, I was not super excited about your team coming into the year, and I was wrong. I was completely wrong. This team is excellent. The Raiders finally learn how to use Josh Jacobs. You have him on a bye week this week, and it just doesn't matter. You find a way to win anyway. A lot of things kind of didn't go the way you wanted them to, and you still put up a big number. I think you probably had high expectations for DK Metcalf that didn't get fulfilled. He didn't have a very good game. Joe Mixon didn't have a very good game on the stat sheet, but he gets that touchdown and he gets that clutch 6 points that took him over the edge this week. And then Stephon Diggs has clearly been the star of your team, though. Diggs has been such a consistent performer. And then Allen Lazard. Like I said in my recap video, you have the number 1 flex points in the entire league this year, and Lazard is the reason why. The Packers' offense without Lazard is nothing. He's the only guy that's really consistently trusted by Rodgers to deliver catches and points. So you have really made out well on Lazard, a pick that a lot of people are probably regretting that they missed. It kind of seems obvious now, but it's hard to get excited about Allen Lazard because he's just so blah. But hey, blah can sometimes win games. So with Jacobs coming back next week, I like that a lot. If Khalil Herbert ends up on a smart organization, other than the dumbass Bears who seem to feed David Montgomery carries for no fucking reason because he's obviously not that good, maybe he turns into something as well. Overall, I'm bullish on your team. You're number 1 in points by a mile. Brendan, keep it up. Keep proving me wrong, brother. I'm happy for you. With that being said, that is going to do it for the rankings this week. A lot of good storylines this week. The season is really spicing up. They're starting to become like a very clear dividing line. I'd say there's 8 to 9 teams in contention, and then there's 5 teams that are just really, really bad that are probably not going to be able to do anything this year. So with that being said, that's going to wrap up the rankings. I hope you guys enjoyed another installment of the traditional League Power Rankings, and I will definitely be getting these out again next week. Hope all is well, and I'll see you next time.